Welcome to the Denver Gazette Sports Podcast. I am your host, Chris Schmedeke, and today we are brought to you by Applewood Plumbing, Heating, and Electric. They have been serving Denver residents for over 50 years. They are the proud sponsor of the Colorado Avalanche and the proud sponsor of this podcast, where we will be talking on this Monday about the Denver Broncos' fifth straight win with Mr. Chris Thompson. Chris, thanks for coming on. How are you today?
Hey, doing well. Thanks for having me, Chris.
All right, so the Broncos, like I said, got their fifth straight win yesterday afternoon over at Empower Field, 29-12 over the Cleveland Browns. I would have to say, pretty dominating performance, Chris. I think that we haven't seen a performance like this from a Bronco team in quite a while.
Yeah, during the winning streak, which has now reached 5 games, basically, well, the Kansas City game, 24-9, they were in pretty good control then. But, most of them have gone down to the wire, and they could go either way. And the last 2 games prior to Sunday really went down to the wire. It looked like they probably would lose, but then they came out with the win. But, yeah, this is obviously an even bigger step because Cleveland, despite their quarterback problems, was playing great defense. They came in at 7-3, number 1 defense in the NFL. And bottom line is the Broncos just dominated them.
And that's my next question. The running game definitely got going yesterday. They went back to it after not having a great performance against Minnesota on the ground. 169 yards on 39 carries. Russ got in the action there running the ball, but they clearly saw something in the Cleveland defense that they felt they could exploit on the ground.
Yeah, definitely. The offensive line has just been doing a great job of late, and continuity has been very important. They haven't had any injuries along the line this year. Same 5 guys, and they were just opening up, maybe not massive holes yesterday, but just methodically marching their way down the field. Early in the season, it was a big deal when the Broncos had a 100-yard rushing game, and they hit 100 at halftime, 101 at halftime, and with the exception of late in the game when they were trying to run the clock out, and then Wilson had 3 kneel downs at the end, they would have put up even more gaudy running stats.
And we got a lot more Samaje Perine yesterday. He is such a physical back, and so is Javonte Williams. And our colleague Paul Klee wrote about the Broncos being bullies, more about the defense, but they're kind of bullies on offense right now too.
Yeah, we were on this very podcast kind of writing off Samaje Perine over the last few weeks when Jaleel McLaughlin was getting the bulk of the carries, and Perine was hardly getting any carries, but then he showed his versatility, and even when he wasn't carrying the ball, he caught a lot of key passes the last couple games, and then he had his best rushing game since very early in the season, and it's reasonable to say that maybe Perine has now supplanted McLaughlin again as the number 2 back, which was the way it was thought to be entering the season. McLaughlin only got 2 carries the entire game, and he only played 2 snaps the entire game. And one of the things with McLaughlin is when he's in the game, not being the greatest in pass blocking, it kind of telegraphs what he's going to do. But when you got Perine in there, he can run. He's done that effectively. Obviously, he's caught the ball effectively, and he's been a top-notch blocker as well.
Well, and that was going to be my next point about Perine is there was definitely a couple times where you saw him pick up those Cleveland blitzes and Russ had 134 yards through the air, but he still completed some passes, and the pass blocking. Jim Schwartz was blitzing. I don't know the percentage. I don't know if you know that, but it felt like they were blitzing a lot.
Yeah, and Perine gives you a lot more bulk, and that's the way the Broncos want to play. Down the stretch is to out physical teams, both on offensive, defense, and Perine. He's one of the strongest guys on the team. I wrote about it last spring about, a great episode in college. A woman, when he was at Oklahoma, runs out of gas in the parking lot and didn't have a jack. So Perine went out and they changed the tire. Although when I asked him about it, he modestly said, "Oh, it was a smart car." But hey, a car is a car, my friend.
Yeah, lifting a car is lifting a car, no matter what kind of car it is. Let's talk about Russ a little bit. Like I said, only threw for 134, but had that great scramble in the pass to Adam Troutman for the touchdown that kind of put the game away. We've talked about him game managing on this podcast a lot, and it just kind of seems to be where he's at right now. And him and head coach Sean Payton seem completely comfortable with it.
Yeah, I mean, the ultimate game manager in history might have been Bob Greasy with the legendary Dolphins in the 70s. And he sometimes would throw like 10 times a game. I mean, Wilson threw, a little bit over 20 yesterday, but 134 yards passing. I mean, not much through the air, except, though, some timely passes. You mentioned the one to Adam Troutman, and he seems perfectly content, Russell Wilson, if the running game is going well, he doesn't need to put up the big numbers through the air.
All right, let's flip over to that defense. 3 turnovers again forced, 4 sacks. They all came late in the game on PJ Walker. But, this defense just continues to make plays. One of those fumble recoveries was a botched snap. And then that weird trick play that the Browns decided to run still made no sense to me. They were ripping it on the broadcast. I don't know how you felt about that. But this defense continues to – they're just the most clutch part of this team.
Yeah, that was a very odd play call. I mean, they just gotten the roughing the passer call. They were down 17-12, and they had started to move the ball a little bit better. Granted, the starting quarterback, Dorian Thompson-Robinson was out of the game. PJ Walker was in, but the first play that PJ Walker's in, you're going to try that kind of trickery. I mean, I know he wasn't the one who fumbled, but that didn't seem to make sense. DJ Jones recovered it, and then that was the key sequence of the game, which led to Troutman's touchdown catch, the 8-yarder. But takeovers have been amazing lately. I mean, 15 in the last 4 games, all with at least 3, and it just seems like when they need one, when they need a big play with a takeaway, they get one.
So, and I think, Wilson had that fumble yesterday, but I think another big part of it is that the offense isn't really turning the ball over either. Like, they're holding on to the ball.
Yeah, I think it's like a plus 12 or so turnover ratio over the last 4 games. So it's not like it's going back and forth. I mean, they've got a tremendous turnover margin, and that's obviously been the key during the 5-game winning streak.
How important was it that PJ Locke was able to play yesterday?
Definitely important. I mean, he's doing a solid job. He's filled in when Kareem Jackson previously was suspended, and he's done a solid job. He had that impressive interception late in the Green Bay game after Jackson had already been ejected. So, yeah, it's going to kind of be interesting to see what happens when Kareem Jackson returns. I mean, if Locke remains injury-free and is established in the lineup, and every time they seem to put Jackson in there, something happens, with a fine, suspension, ejection. So it'll be interesting to see what might happen with that position down the road.
Sean Payton was asked about the officiating, and I'm going to ask you that too. Some of those calls, I think it seemed like a rough crew on both sides. I would probably say, to be diplomatic about it, and you could probably give me the same answer Sean Payton did, but how did you feel about some of those calls on both sides? How do you feel about some of those calls in that game yesterday?
Well, the PJ Locke call, unnecessary roughness. I mean, he said it wasn't the smartest play. That was a correct call. The Baron Browning call, roughing the passer, that could have gone either way. The only thing was it was a late flag. If he bounces right up, maybe it's not a flag. So I think the official saw while he's down on the ground, and that exasperated the hit a bit and threw the flag. And that one was close, but it was quite the hard hit. And Sean Payton didn't complain about it in the least after the game. He said communication with the officials was good. But, yeah, they got the turnover in the very next play and won the game. So it would have been interesting maybe to see what Peyton would have said if they had marched right downfield after that call, scored a go-ahead touchdown and won the game, the Browns.
Because that was a 3rd and 12, right? Or it was 3rd and
12, yeah, fairly deep in Cleveland territory, and they were ready to punt from, near their own goal line, and boom, all of a sudden they are going 15 yards the other way for a first down.
There was a lot of hype about the Cleveland defense, coming into this game. Did you see, I know Myles Garrett got hurt pretty early, which probably, kind of hampered them, but was that defense as good as advertised? Because I didn't feel like it was.
Yeah, if you hadn't have been told that this was a number 1 ranked defense in the NFL, I don't think you would have known it. I mean, Myles Garrett did, although he's banged up a little, play 69% of the snaps, and he did little, no sacks, no quarterback pressures, 2 tackles, and the Broncos just marched methodically down the field, took a 14 2 touchdowns early on in the game, one by P. Ryan and then one in the second quarter. And pretty much controlled the game.
All right, so let's talk playoff picture ahead of this game in Houston that's coming up 11 a.m. on Sunday. Broncos I guess the Colts hold the 7 seed by tiebreakers. Broncos right behind them. Buffalo's in there at 6-6. Who am I forgetting? Who else is in there?
Well, Indianapolis, as you mentioned, it's a 3-way tie for 7th at 6-5, but Indianapolis and Houston both have better conference records than the Broncos. So the Broncos are technically number 9, and then Buffalo a half game out after that. And the Raiders are kind of still in the mix. They're 5-6 after that, and it's not looking too good for the Chargers. They're 4-7. So those look like 2 tough games for the Broncos down the stretch, but if the Chargers are just packing it in, that'll help the Broncos.
So what are we going to see from this Houston team? Of course, they have C.J. Stroud, who is, probably the offensive rookie of the year. But what else? What kind of defense and offense are we going to see from this team?
Yeah, C.J. Stroud has been unbelievable as a rookie this year and threatened to shatter all sorts of rookie records, but when you're a rookie quarterback, it seems like those games crop up where you do look like a rookie quarterback. So Vance Joseph is obviously going to be trying to find ways to disrupt CJ Stroud with the defense and obviously continue to get some takeaways. And you look at Houston and you wonder how they keep winning or at least keep remaining extremely competitive against teams that are better on paper, but they've done quite a job down there under DeMeco Ryans' first-year coach.
Yep, they got beat by Jacksonville yesterday. So this starts a 3-game trip for the Broncos. It goes L.A. and then Detroit, right? Detroit's the last of the 3, right?
Correct.
Right. So, with the way the Broncos are playing right now, is it realistic to think they can go 2-1 on this road trip? I mean, they always play pretty well in L.A. I guess this is the game this coming Sunday that they really would need to get.
Yeah, I would definitely think so. I think they got some well-needed confidence winning. I know Buffalo now is only 6-6, but that's a tough place to play. I think a couple of weeks ago, winning at Buffalo gives them some confidence heading out on the road. And it's interesting to see how it's kind of turned. I mean, looked at this 3-game stretch when the season started and you thought Houston would be the easy game, but no, that's going to turn out to be, at least on paper, a tougher game than against the Chargers. And then the third one is Detroit, but I mean, Detroit has proven vulnerable. We just saw Green Bay come in and wallop them in Detroit on Thanksgiving Day, and then they laid an egg a couple weeks ago at Baltimore. So Detroit is having a fine season, but they can be vulnerable.
How many wins do you think it'll take for them to get the 7th seed? Is it 9 or 10?
I think they need to count on winning 10 games. It's going to be interesting to see how the tiebreakers go. It's going to be interesting to see how those teams in the AFC North shake out. I mean, Pittsburgh.
Yeah, that's the weird
winning games, although on paper they're not that good. with their quarterback play, and then look at the Browns, their quarterback. You don't know what's going to happen now with their starting quarterback having a concussion. Is he going to be replaced by PJ Walker? They're going to try to get Joe Flacco up to speed. So it's going to be kind of, and then Cincinnati, I mean, are they totally done or not without Joe Burrow? So it's going to be kind of interesting to see what happens and how many of those AFC North teams are still there in the mix. And I think it helps the Broncos that, they will start knocking each other off, playing each other. But I think 10 can do it, and 9 would depend on, obviously, on the tiebreakers. I mean, if they beat Houston, that's a key tiebreaker. And if you're going to lose games, you want to lose to NFC teams. So if one of those losses is to Detroit, that at least doesn't hamper their AFC conference record.
Yeah, I mean, I think looking at that schedule, I can imagine 4 more wins. They have New England on Christmas Eve. New England is, they're the worst team in the AFC right now. At home, they have them at home. They have to go beat Vegas, which they haven't done. And I think that maybe if it comes down to that last game of the season, like, they're going to have to go to Vegas and win, a place that they have not won since, it's 7 straight or whatever it is now.
Yeah, but we'll have to see if the Raiders are still in the playoff race. Obviously, it's going to be much tougher if they're in the playoff race, but there's no guarantee the Raiders at 5-6 are still going to be in the race. So that would impact that game as well.
For sure. All right, Chris, thanks for coming on and breaking this all down with me. Make sure you subscribe to our podcast on Spotify or on Apple. Make sure to go to denvergazette.com to read all of Chris's stuff on the Broncos, as well as our whole staff stuff on all the other teams in the area. We've got columns from Woody Page and Paul Klee on yesterday's game to check out as well. And Chris, again, thanks for coming on, and we will catch up next week after the Houston game.
All right. Really appreciate it. Thanks.